Hi everyone, this is Ruchi Kulkarni and today we are going to do the chapter Kathmandu from Class 9 book Beehive. This chapter is written by Vikram Seth. Kathmandu is an extract from a travelogue written by Vikram Seth from the book From Heaven Lake. This extract narrates his long journey from China to India via Tibet and Nepal. This chapter is an account of his time spent in Nepal and the description of the two famous temples of Kathmandu, the Pashupatinath, which is sacred to the Hindus, and the Bodhnath Stupa, which is sacred to the Buddhists. He not only describes the ambience inside these temples, but also tells his observations about their surroundings and contrasts the hectic activity in the Hindu temple with the peacefulness in the Buddhist stupa. Let's begin reading and understanding this chapter, after which we will understand the significance of the title, the moral given by this chapter, and the summary and question answers at the end. But before we begin with reading and explanation, let's know something about the author Vikram Seth. Vikram Seth was born on June 28 in 1952 in Calcutta, India. He is an Indian poet, novelist, and travel writer. He is better known for his verse novel, The Golden Gate in 1986, and his epic novel, A Suitable Boy in 1993. Vikram Seth was raised in London and India. Although Seth's first volume of poetry, Mappings, was published in 1980, he did not attract critical attention until the publication of his humorous travelogue, From Heaven Lake, Travels from Sinkiang and Tibet, which was published in 1983. He also wrote a collection of 10 poems, Beastly Tales from Here and There, in 1992. He was awarded with Padma Shri, Sahitya Akademi Award, and W. H. Smith Literary Award. Do you like traveling? The writer Vikram Seth enjoys it very much. In his book, From Heaven Lake, he describes a long journey from China to India via Tibet and Nepal. Have you heard of places like Ajmer Sharif, Madurai, Sanchi, Varanasi, Sarnath, and Helbed? Can you name some other places like these? What do the surroundings of a holy place in your city look like? Think about it as you read Vikram Seth's description of Kathmandu. I get a cheap room in the center of town and sleep for hours. The next morning, with Mr. Shah's son and nephew, I visit the two temples in Kathmandu that are most sacred to Hindus and Buddhists. Sacred means holy. At Pashupatinath, outside which a sign proclaims entrance for the Hindus only. Proclaims means make known publicly or officially. There is an atmosphere of febrile confusion. Febrile confusion means hurried activity or complete chaos. Priests, hawkers, devotees, tourists, cows, monkeys, pigeons, and dogs roam through the grounds. We offer a few flowers. There are so many worshippers that some people trying to get the priest's attention are elbowed aside by others pushing their way to the front. Elbowed aside means pushed by elbow. The author starts with the fact that when he reached Kathmandu, he got a cheap room in the center of the town and where he spent his night. And the next morning, with his friend Mr. Shah's son and nephew, he went to visit two temples which are very famous in Kathmandu. They are most holy or sacred to Hindus and Buddhists. Pashupatinath is a temple which is famous for Hindus and only Hindu people were allowed to enter there. But outside that Hindu temple or Pashupatinath temple, there was utter confusion. There was lot of chaos. There were many people outside like priests, hawkers, devotees, tourists, cows, monkeys, pigeons, everyone was roaming around through the grounds of that temple. There in the temple, the author offers a few flowers, but he saw that there were so many worshippers that each one of them was trying to get the priest's attention and they were trying to push each other aside to come to the front. A princess of the Nepalese loyal house appears. Everyone bows and makes way. By the main gate, a party of saffron clad Westerners struggle for permission to enter. Saffron clad means people who are wearing orange colored clothes. The policeman is not convinced that they are Hindus. Only Hindus are allowed to enter the temple. A fight breaks out between two monkeys. One chases the other, who jumps onto a Shivalinga, then runs screaming around the temples and down to the river, the holy Bhagmati that flows below. A corpse is being cremated on its banks. Corpse means a dead body. Cremated means an action of burning a dead body. Washerwomen are at their work and children bathe. From a balcony, a basket of flowers and leaves, old offerings now wilted. Wilted means drooped, that is not so fresh, is dropped into the river. A small shrine half protrudes from the stone platform on the river bank. Shrine is a place of worship, and protrude means stick out. When it emerges fully, the goddess inside will escape, and the evil period of Kali Yuga will end on earth. Kali Yuga is said to be the present age, which is full of conflict and sin. When the author was in Pashupatinath temple and he saw so many worshippers trying to push each other aside to move forward, he saw a princess of Nepalese royal house coming there. When she comes there, everybody bows and makes way for her. At the main gate, there is a group of Westerners or foreigners who are wearing orange colored clothes, and they are fighting with the policemen to enter the temple. But since that temple is only for Hindus, the policeman is not convinced that they are Hindus. On the other hand, there is a fight between two monkeys. One monkey is chasing the other monkey who jumps onto a Shivalinga. Shivalinga is a statue of Lord Shiva which is worshipped. And then the other monkey runs screaming around the temple. There's also a river which is flowing just beside the temple, and the river's name is Bhagmati. A dead body is being cremated on the banks of that same river. There are women who are washing their clothes. Children are bathing in the same holy river. And from a balcony above, a basket of wilted flowers and leaves which were offered to the god there is being dropped in the same river. So in other words, that river Bhagmati was being polluted in several ways. There is also a small shrine where there is a stone platform on the river bank, and it is said that when this shrine or this place of worship will emerge fully, the goddess inside that shrine will escape, and that time will be the end of Kali Yuga, which is supposed to be an evil period, which is supposed to be a period when people are in complete conflict and they are making sins. At that time, this Kali Yuga period will end. At Bodhnath Stupa, the Buddhist shrine of Kathmandu, there is, in contrast, a sense of stillness. Its immense wide dome is ringed by a road. Small shops stand on its outer edge. Many of these are owned by Tibetan immigrants. Immigrants are people who come to live permanently in a foreign country. Felt bags, Tibetan prints, and silver jewelry can be bought here. There are no crowds. This is a heaven of quietness in the busy streets around. Heaven means a safe place. Kathmandu is vivid, mercenary, religious, with small shrines to flower-adorned deities along the narrowest and busiest streets. Mercenary means money-oriented, with fruit sellers, flute sellers, hawkers of postcards, shops selling Western cosmetics, film rolls and chocolate, or copper utensils and Nepalese antiques. Antiques are very old and expensive pieces which can be kept in museums. Film songs blare out from the radios. Blare out means play loudly. Car horns sound. Bicycle bells ring. Stray cows low questioningly at motorcycles. Vendors shout out their wares. Wares are objects for selling. Now the author comes at Buddhist stupa, which is known as Bodhnath stupa. This is a Buddhist holy place which gives out a very contrast feeling to Pashupatinath temple. Pashupatinath temple was very chaotic. There was a lot of noise and chaos around the temple. But on the other hand, Bodhanath Stupa gives a sense of stillness. There was a lot of quietness or calmness around this holy place. It had a huge wide dome, and around that dome there was a road. And on that road there were small shops. All these small shops were mostly owned by Tibetan immigrants, people who came from Tibet and settled down there. Those were the shop owners, and they had variety of things to sell, like felt bags or Tibetan prints or silver jewelry. Everything could be found there. There were no crowds. So that place, that is Bodhanath Stupa, was a very safe and quiet place. Then he goes to explain the city life of Kathmandu. He says that it is very vivid, but it is money oriented because it's a tourist place. Although people are religious there are small shrines where the deities or gods and goddesses are decorated with flowers. There are fruit sellers, there are people who sell flutes, hawkers of postcards, shops which sell different things like Western cosmetics or film rolls or chocolates, copper utensils, or objects of Nepal, etc. And there was so much of sound there, like from the radios, one could hear the film songs coming out. One could also hear a lot of horn sounds of cars, the bicycles' bells ringing, the stray cows were quietly moving around, and a lot of vendors were shouting to sell their objects. I indulge myself mindlessly by a bar of marzipan. Marzipan is a sweet made with grated almonds. A corn on the cob roasted in a charcoal brazier. Brazier is an open stove on the pavement, rubbed with salt, chili powder, and lemon. A couple of love story comics, and even a Reader's Digest. All this I wash down with Coca-Cola and a nauseating orange drink and feel much the better for it. Wash down means eat. I consider what route I should take back home. If I were propelled by enthusiasm for travel per se, propelled means motivated and per se means by itself, I would go by bus and train to Patna, then sail up the Ganges past Banaras to Allahabad, then up the Yamuna past Agra to Delhi. But I am too exhausted and homesick. Exhausted means tired. Today is the last day of August. Go home, I tell myself. Move directly towards home. I enter a Nepal Airlines office and buy a ticket for tomorrow's flight. When the author is in the marketplace, he enjoys certain foods. He buys a bar of marzipan. Marzipan is a sweet which is made of grated almonds. He also buys a corn on the cob, which is roasted on the charcoal open stove, and that corn is rubbed with salt and chili powder and lemon. Then he buys certain love story comics and a Reader's Digest. And all these eatables he has with Coca-Cola and another orange drink, after which he feels much better because his hunger is now satisfied. After that, he tries to plan his route back home. One option to him was to go by bus and train to Patna, then go to Banaras, then via Ganga river he should go to Allahabad, and via Yamuna he should go to Agra and Delhi. But then he feels that he is too tired and he wants to get home as quickly as possible. So he tells himself that he should directly go towards home. On deciding, he goes to Nepal Airlines office and he buys a ticket for his home for the next day's flight. I look at the flute seller standing in a corner of the square near the hotel. In his hand is a pole with an attachment at the top from which 50 or 60 bansuris means flute, protrude in all directions, like the quills of a porcupine. Quills are thorns of porcupine. They are of bamboo. There are cross flutes and recorders. From time to time, he stands the pole on the ground, selects a flute, and plays for a few minutes. The sound rises clearly above the noise of the traffic and the hawkers' cries. He plays slowly, meditatively, without excessive display. Meditatively means thoughtfully. He does not shout out his wares. Occasionally he makes a sale, but in a curiously off-handed way, as if this were incidental to his enterprise. Off-handed means casual, not showing much interest in something. Sometimes he breaks off playing to talk to the fruit seller. I imagine that this has been the pattern of his life for years. The author now starts to observe a flute seller. This person had a long pole in his hand. The top of this pole had around 50 or 60 flutes or bansuris attached to it. That entire thing looked like a porcupine. Porcupine is an animal which has lot of thorns on its body. These flutes are made up of bamboo. They are cross flutes and recorders. And from time to time he would keep that pole on the ground, select a flute from that group and play it for few minutes. This flute sound used to be very clearly heard even in the noise of traffic and hawkers' cries. And whenever he played that flute, he played it very slowly and thoughtfully, which showed that he really immersed in that sound. Unlike other hawkers, he did not shout to sell his flutes, but occasionally one or two persons would come to buy it. But looking at him, the author realized that this person was more interested in playing that flute rather than selling them to the customers. Then in between, the flute seller would stop for some time and speak to other fruit sellers or other people or hawkers who were selling fruits. After that, he would resume again. And the author imagines this pattern of his life must have been there for years, or this is how flute seller must be living for years with this routine. I find it difficult to tear myself away from the square. Flute music always does this to me. It is at once the most universal and most particular of sounds. There is no culture that does not have its flute. The reed ney, the recorder, the Japanese shakuhachi, the deep bansuri of Hindustani classical music, the clear or breathy flutes of South America, the high-pitched Chinese flutes, each has its specific fingering and compass. Fingering is the way of placing the fingers to play different notes, and compass here means range. It weaves its own associations. Yet to hear any flutist, it seems to me to be drawn into the commonality of all mankind, to be moved by music closest in its phrases and sentences to the human voice. Its motive force too is living breath. It too needs to pause and breathe before it can go on. The music of the flute mesmerized the author, and he could not move away from there. He finds flute music to be the most universal sound. Flutes are played in many regions and have different names and varieties, like the shakuhachi in Japan, the deep bansuri of Hindustani classical music, breathy flutes in South America, and the high-pitched flutes in China. Each flute has a different way to play it, and the sound varies in pitch and depth. The sound that merges out of the flute is the most common sound, that is the sound of human voice. As the bansuri is played by the mouth, the player exhales into the flute to produce music, and when he pauses to take a breath, the music of the flute also stops. So here the author tries to compare the sound of the music with the human voice and the human breathing. And he feels that this commonality or this similar feature is what brings the flute very close to human beings or to the entire mankind. That I can be so affected by a few familiar phrases on the bansuri surprises me at first, for on the previous occasions that I have returned home after long absence abroad, I have hardly noticed such details, and certainly have not invested them with the significance I now do. Significance means importance. The author at the end says that he is so surprised that he is deeply influenced or impressed by the sounds of the bansuri. Earlier also he used to go places and returned home, but he never thought about that. This time he noticed the flute seller and his objects, and this time he actually invested into the importance of those flutes. This chapter is an extract taken from Vikram Seth's travelogue, and as the name suggests, this chapter briefly explains the main locations of Kathmandu, the two temples, that is Pashupatinath temple and Bodhnath stupa. And he very vividly describes the people living in Nepal, the everyday routine of these people, the hawkers, the holy places, their problems, and his feelings about those places. So, this chapter, Kathmandu, is very aptly titled because it describes the serenity or the beauty of Kathmandu. Although this chapter is a part of travelogue, it does not give any apparent message. But still, if we look at the deeper layers, we may find some message to learn from. The author firstly disapproves of the noise and confusion in the Hindu temple, and he admires the serenity or peacefulness of the Buddhist temple. So he also reveals how thoughtlessly people pollute our rivers by washing clothes on its banks, cremating corpses, and dumping rubbish in them. So, this chapter conveys the message that the purity and serenity of the holy places must be maintained, and it is up to us to do that. So, we must maintain the sanctity of holy places. That's all in this session today. I'll see you again in my next video with a new topic. Till then, take good care of yourself and be there till the end to see the summary and question answers. God bless you and goodbye.